back in the olden days when kings decided that they had their own God-given right, because that's what kings thought. Well, the people decided that's not true. They believed they had their own rights. So they rioted against the kings and got rid of his God-given power and got rid of the power of the king and decided to give themselves their own power, because that's how it works. September 16th of 1810, Father Hidalgo spoke his famous Grito de Lores. It sent a fire of rebellion into the Mexicans, and so they started to rebel. Well, yeah, so what happens is the government doesn't like that, and so they kill them all. Alright, and so after the government killed them, in 1811, they kill Father Hidalgo for his actions against the government. Okay, so in 1810 through 1821, the Mexicans fought independence from Spain. So the Mexicans are these little red dudes, and the blue dudes right there are, of course, the Spaniards. And so these Spaniards fought against the Mexicans for a really long time in this great battle for independence. And so eventually, the Mexicans gained independence from Spain on September 16th of 18. So there's this man, Stephen F. Dawson. He's in New Orleans, and he decides, well, Texas is a great place for opportunity, so I'm going to take 300 Texan colonists over to Mexico. And so my friend here, Dawson, will show you. He's like, all right, 300 men right here. We're going to take them right all over to Mexico, because that's what the people do nowadays. And so these 300 moved all the way to Mexico, as shown here, or as now we call it, Texas. And so we all moved there. So these Texans were moving into Texas, and so they were like, we're filling up Texas. And that was bad to these Mexicans. And so there was a lot of what we might call conflict between these two people. Well, the Texans had this thing where they liked states' rights. States' rights was where the states could make their own decision. Mexicans not like that, so there was conflict. Well, the Mexican government decided that states' rights would be abolished, and so, you know, they're like, no more states' rights. That made the Mexicans happy, but the Texans very sad. They also added on to some things where they'd get rid of Texans so Texans could no longer come into Mexico. And they made it harder for Texans to live. They taxed them and all this other stuff. And so that kind of caused some anger with the Texans. The Constitution of 1824 was pretty much that it gave people states' rights, and the Texans supported those states' rights. But of course, the Mexican nationalists decided that they did not like these state rights, and they feared having a strong state government. And so, the Texans, of course, supported this states' rights, while the Mexican nationalists feared it.
The law of April 6, 1830 basically banned the states from coming over to Texas. But they did encourage Mexico and Europe to come over to Texas. And they also offered money and land to them. They also charged goods on. They put a customs duty on goods coming in and out of Texas, which the people in Texas really hated. They also put money over overseas products.
So what happened is, John Austin had a cannon. He was trying to take it to Velasco. Well, Colonel Dominguez, I think Domingo, was like, "No, you can't go there." Um, okay, his name's Colonel Domingo Ugartichia. Well, he didn't want John Austin to go. Well, John Austin needed to get there really bad with all his Texans, and Colonel was like, "No," and so he had his Mexicans. Well, this was the first time anything was fired. This was like the first time they actually fought in the Texas Revolution. There were 10 Texans who were shot and killed, and 5 Mexicans who were killed. So 10 out of 5 Texans and Mexicans were killed. So, well, the Mexicans had to retreat because, we were too powerful. And so we got to Velasco.
During the Convention of October 1832, 56 delegates met and they drafted new resolutions with each other. Stephen F. Austin was elected the president of this convention. And what the resolutions said is the repealment of the law of April 6, 1830. Also, the delegates wanted a new Texas government and the repealment of customs duties, which tax goods. During the April 1st, 1833 convention, it was a brand new convention, but all they really did was draft the same resolutions. But also, something else important that they did was the delegates made a new constitution for Texas.
The Battle of Gonzales was, so there was 160 Texas colonists. They had a very important piece in the Mexican and Texas War. What it was a cannon. This cannon was a very, very important because they could use it to defeat whole armies. So the 160 colonists took that cannon and they buried it and they pledged to fight to the death for that cannon. And so they put a flag over it and they said, "Come and take it." That's a very, very important part. And so these 160 Texans fought against the Mexican army with their cannon, and eventually those Mexicans had to retreat because this cannon was so powerful. So the cannon killed the Mexicans and they had to retreat. The end. And so now this is the first battle of Texas Revolution. On March 1st of 1836, 54 delegates began meeting on March 1st at the village of Washington on the Brazos. Each of the settlements of Texas were represented by delegates elected 1 month earlier. Richard Ellis was elected president of the convention and Herbert S. Kimball secretary. So on March 2nd of 1836, the Texans drafted a new constitution for Texas. The Battle of the Alamo is when Santa Anna took a lot of Mexicans over to the Alamo and decided to take it over. The Alamo was a really big advantage in the Texas Revolution. Well, the Texans fortified the Alamo with 21 guns, 21 cannons to be exact. And so they laid them out all over the Alamo and were ready for a fight. Well, the only thing they needed were volunteers. So Neil needed them very bad. He needed people to fight. And so he got his volunteers. Well, Jim went with another guy to go get volunteers while Neil leaves for a family emergency. And so Mexicans arrive while they're gone and, start killing everybody. And there's this big battle between the Mexicans and the Texans. The Mexicans seized the Alamo after 13 days. So 189 Texans were killed and 600 Mexicans were killed. So 300 Texans surrendered at the Battle of Coletta. The Battle of Coletta was on a hill. That's why it's pretty important, because hills were, very strategic areas back in the day. And so they knew that they were going to be taken to Goliad. So what the Texans thought, our Texans right here, thought were that they were going to be taken as prisoners of war. And so, they're like, oh, it's okay. We're just gonna be put in cells and that's it. That's all that's gonna happen. But yeah, so prisoners, sad, but they're not gonna die or anything. But what really happened was our evil conquistador Santa Anna, the leader of the Mexican army, thought something a lot different. He's like, no, that's not how it's going to happen. What's going to happen is, what's going to happen is we're going to massacre them in Goliad. And so they took them over to Goliad and they killed them all. So that's why whenever the Texans fought, they'd scream, remember the Alamo and remember Goliad. And so now the Texans are even more angry. So the Battle of San Jacinto happened on April 6th, and what happened was there were some Texans, and they were ready for a fight after the Goliad massacre and the Battle of the Alamo. So they decide, all right, let's head out, let's go kill these Mexicans, and so that's what they do. They head out, and on April 21st, a couple days later, they arrive at Vince's Bayou. And so once they're there, they decide, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to burn the bridge. So what they do is they burn up the bridge. The bridge is gone. They burn it to the ground. There's nothing left. And you know what they do next? They attack. They ambush the Mexicans. They kill them. They have 2 cannons. Yeah, so they ambush them, the Mexicans. And so what happens is they have 2 cannons called the Twin Sisters that they use really well. They're a really big asset, as shown in this video. And so Houston's leading all this, and they're just destroying everybody. And so eventually, after 18 minutes, they kill all of them. Well, they don't kill all of them, but they kill a lot of them.